And we are back with another edition of the Daily Beacon Sports Podcast. Today we're joined from Lewis from Oklahoma to help us preview this Tennessee-Oklahoma matchup. So, Lewis, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us where we can find some of your stuff?
Yeah, so I'm Louis Raser. I'm the assistant sports editor with the OU Daily. You can find all my stuff and all the daily stuff at oudaily.com. We've got a lot coming out this week. Huge week in Norman. The buzz around here with College Game Day coming is insane. It's the first time they'll be here with fans, excluding the COVID year, since I believe 2012 against Notre Dame. Um, Huge game coming up. I mean, can't express how excited I am and the people of Norman are for this one.
Yeah, and let's kind of dive right into the matchup. That's a good lead in. It's been kind of an up and down 3 weeks, it seems, from Oklahoma for the outside, from the outside looking in, obviously struggling with some, lesser caliber opponents, one would say. What's been your takeaway from these first 3 weeks for the Sooners?
Well, it's that, I mean, first off, injuries have hurt them badly. I mean, their offensive line is depleted. Their main four receivers are out or at least battling with injuries. It's been tough, but even so, the offense is just not working in the way that OU fans were hoping that it would. Seth Latrell, he hasn't fully opened up the playbook yet. I know the game against Temple, their first game, that was a huge complaint for fans, was his vanilla style playbook. But even since then, the offense has not found a groove, and they'll get to where they have one three and out, and then like it kind of tumbles where they have three or four in a row, and they let teams back into it. That's exactly what they did last week against Tulane. Even defensively, you have lapses from time to time. They're letting up some easy touchdowns. Some miscommunications on defense, not getting set in time. And for an offense like Tennessee that runs fast pace, you can't be doing that.
Yeah, and that kind of what's been I guess, talk from Venables, who's a defensive coach, about some of those defensive miscues? Because it feels like to me that if Oklahoma would be good at anything, it would be Venables in that defense.
Yeah, he talked about it today. I mean, I think he's somewhat happy with what the defense, with where the defense is at. Obviously, coaching those Clemson defenses for all those years, he has a ridiculously high standard for where his defenses need to be. But he was talking about it today, and he actually joked that, if he could go back and be reborn again, that he would come out and be an offensive coach because of how stressful it is being a defensive guy. But I think it's weird in Oklahoma now because the people of Norman are so used to those high powered offenses, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts slinging the ball left and right, 50 to 49 scores week out, week in, week out. And it's not like that anymore. This is a very defensive dominant team. So that's heading into this matchup. That's going to be their bread and butter. That's where they really need to win. When the offense is struggling, the defense needs to get out there, force turnovers. They certainly need to win the turnover margin. They need to force some miscues from Noah. How do you say his last name?
Oh,
The
Iamaliava.
Iamaliava. All right, I'll
There
try
you
to
go.
remember that for the game
Yeah, say
time.
that one three times fast.
Oh boy. But yeah, I mean it's been a solid defense and I think it'll continue to grow throughout the season. You got a new defensive coordinator, Zach Alley, who's worked with Brent Venables a lot, who's putting out very strange looks. He's got defensive ends lined up as linebacker. He's got weird packages that he's putting out left and right. So it's defense is definitely the strong suit, which is a weird thing to say here in Norman.
Yeah, I also wanted to hit on before we dive deeper into, each side of the ball, kind of more big picture. Obviously, a storyline on the Tennessee side of things is Josh Heupel returning home to Norman, where he led them to a national championship in the early 2000s and then coached, and then kind of that relationship got severed in the mid 2010s. Has that storyline been as big on your side of things, or coaches talking about Heupel's, return home to where he got to start both playing and coaching?
Oh yeah, it's been huge. I mean, Brent was just asked about it today. He was talking about kind of his first impression of Heupel when he came in as a quarterback, and he said he was looking out at Heupel throwing, and apparently he had come in as just this short, scrawny kid, and he was throwing kind of ducks. He didn't have a tight spiral or anything like that. And Brent was like, "Who is this kid? Are we joking here?" And he was wrong about it, admittedly so. But yeah, the buzz around that has been big here. I think it's going to be interesting. Somebody, I think it was last year at SEC Media Days, somebody, I can't remember who, but he said Heupel might be the most forgotten OU quarterback. And he's absolutely right. I mean, it's weird. And some of that obviously is the recent success. I mean, when you have Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, even Caleb Williams for a couple months, even stemming back to Sam Bradford, you're going to forget about some guys in the past. But for a national championship winning quarterback, I'm surprised that there's not as much talk around him. But certainly this week, the buzz is big. Brent said that, the fans obviously aren't going to be rooting for him this week, but they understand, they root for people. So maybe down the line when he plays opponents, certainly, I don't know. Do you guys have Texas on the schedule?
No, just Oklahoma.
Okay, well, maybe Mizzou. Mizzou?
No, because
Mizzou?
Eli Drinkwitz had that exchange with Heupel in the middle of the field, and they won't play again. Now, I will say there's been a couple playoff projections that have Missouri heading to Neyland Stadium in the
Yeah.
playoffs, so I'm sure that would make for a good one. But I'm glad you said Sam Bradford there. It's kind of a deep cut, but I learned through some research earlier this week that Heupel was Sam Bradford's quarterbacks coach when he was at OU, so it's kind of passing the torch there. But let's dive into that quarterback position. Jackson Arnold, watching the tape has a lot of qualities that you want in a quarterback: can run, live arm. It also seems that when he's pressured, though, is when he kind of runs into some trouble. And we've seen Tennessee's defensive line; their bread and butter is applying pressure to keep the secondary from being in the line of fire. What do you think Jackson Arnold will do this Saturday, and what have you seen from him so far this season?
I think his performance is so much determined by the offensive line. I mean, they really need to step up. You said it, James Pierce. There's so much talk about him around here, and I'm sure in Knoxville about maybe the best player in college football this year. But yeah, Arnold, he needs to not let drives or kind of what I was talking earlier. They'll have a three and out, and then it leads to a couple more, and then OU fans start booing, and then everything just starts collapsing. You let the other team back into it. They can't afford to do that. They can't afford to spiral out of control, especially against a team like Tennessee, and even down the roads against teams like Texas, Alabama, LSU, you name it in the SEC. I think that's number one. Jackson Arnold, I mean, when he threw the pick six last week, I was impressed, and the coaching staff was impressed with how he rebounded. He had that long touchdown run. He's been probably the best rusher on the Oklahoma team, which is another factor that goes into his performance this Saturday is they got to get the run game going, and they couldn't against Houston, and they couldn't really against Temple, and aside from Arnold, they really couldn't against Tulane. So what makes you think that they're going to do it against a high caliber defense and a high caliber defensive line like Tennessee? So he needs help. He needs Nick Anderson and some of his receivers back. But for Arnold, I think just dealing with all the pressure, just staying poised under that, not making, maybe you make a mistake, but you don't make a horrible mistake. You throw a bad pass and you miss a guy, but don't let that bad pass be an interception. I think those are kind of the keys for him and really any young quarterback that's going into his fifth start.
And you mentioned Seth Latrell, offensive coordinator, earlier. Do you think he opens the playbook up this week? And what does that help? Because you said they haven't been able to get the run game going against group of five teams. Will they be able to do that against Tennessee? What changes can this team make, this Oklahoma team, to get the offense working?
They got to do something. I'll tell you that because they have not gotten it working yet. And you can put up 34 points against Tulane's defense, but what does that translate to against Tennessee? I think he's certainly got some tricks up his sleeve. It's tough though. You look at this matchup and Tennessee. It looks like they're poised to dominate the run game. And that's something that Oklahoma has struggled with, continues to struggle with. It all stems from the offensive line. They lost every starter that they had from last year on the O line. Tried to go to the portal. In fact, Brent Venables said today that they were targeting Tennessee's left tackle in the portal this past offseason. He praised your guys' center, your entire O line, and everybody in the trenches really for Tennessee. So yeah, I got a little sidetracked. What was it was Latrell. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
Latrell definitely opens it up. If you don't this week, then when are you going to? He's got to open it up. And I think eventually, matchup wise, you go down the list. Tennessee has Oklahoma beat in most areas. I think you got to take some chances. You're probably getting Nick Anderson back, which is huge. We don't know. I know Jaleel Farouk is out. Jaden Gibson's out for the season. So take some chances to Deion Burks. Brennan Thompson is a really fast guy. And then somehow pray that you get that running game to open up. Because another thing has been big plays. They haven't had almost any explosive or big plays. That's something that I'm hearing in my Twitter comment section or X comment section every week is this team's boring to watch. They're not having any 20-plus yard plays. And people are absolutely right. So if they can afford to do that against Tennessee, that would open up a lot of things.
And to Brent Venables' credit about the left tackle, I think everybody in the country was going after Lance Hurd, and it just happened to be Tennessee that landed him. But let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Tennessee's coming in with one of their best, coming off their best offensive performance in the modern era, really, most points, most yards, albeit against Kent State. But still, it just kind of shows what this offense is under Nico Iamaleava and Josh Heupel. What do you see Oklahoma's defensive game plan being this week? What have coaches and players been talking about?
Yeah, I think that's the matchup of the week there. That's what people are paying so much to see this game for is OU's defense versus Tennessee's offense. Look, I think Nico, it's his first road game ever playing in at the collegiate level. I think the atmosphere, first off, has to step up. That's always in Norman. That's always talk about how the students are leaving the game early and heading to the bars by before halftime. I wouldn't expect that to happen this week, especially because it's a nighttime kick. It's such a marquee matchup. So the atmosphere needs to really step up and try to rattle Nico, and the defense needs to do that just as much. They need to apply pressure somehow. I don't know. It's a very strong defense, and it's a defense with some veteran presence. You got Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman. Those were two guys who were projected high in the NFL draft. They come back for another year, and then you got guys around them. It seems like every week there's somebody on the defensive line who's stepping up, getting a couple sacks, making some big plays. That's what they need. They absolutely need the defense to step up, create momentum so that the offense can carry that over. And like I mentioned earlier, they got to win the turnover battle. You have to force some turnovers on that side of the field, set the offense up in good position. And then on the offensive side, you can't lose many, if any.
Now I want to end with some more bigger picture questions. You mentioned it a little bit, and I guess we both mentioned it a little bit. This is Oklahoma's first SEC game as a member of the conference. What has the mentality been from players, coaches? What's the vibe on campus heading into the Southeastern Conference with their biggest sport?
You know, players have been, I don't want to say downplaying it. Everybody knows it's a huge thing. Everybody knows they're part of history here at Oklahoma. It's a huge deal. I mean, since I got accepted and the summer before I came to OU and here I'm a senior, I've been hearing about this SEC talk. Is Oklahoma ready for the SEC? That's the magic question that I've heard 5 million times now. I've been asked it. I've asked it. It's a huge deal. But I think Brent Venables, he has this mindset of every single game is the same to him. And I truly believe him when he says that. He acts like it, and I think he instills that into the players. The vibe around Norman, though, is great. I mean, they were certainly frustrated with the Big 12 with the 11 a.m. kickoffs, with not many huge games unless, Oklahoma State is coming here or Baylor has a big year or something like that. But the vibe around Norman is high, but it's also cautiously optimistic because they know that this first game is huge. I mean, Brent Venables said it today. Probably nobody in the country is playing as well as Tennessee. Matchup wise, they stack up against OU. They're probably going to dominate in the trenches. There's a lot that Oklahoma has to do to win this game. But yeah, the vibes are high. We'll see how they are Sunday. A lot could happen, but no, it's a really exciting time to be in Norman, definitely.
And then another kind of bigger picture question. Ooh, excuse me, with Brent Venables, where do you see him kind of? We're already to the point of the season. You look at like Billy Napier, where his seat is on fire at Florida, and then there's other places where coaches are still pretty comfortable. Where do you see Brent Venables at this point in his Oklahoma tenure, are people still behind him as the coach of this team? Is there confidence? What is the vibe around, I guess, Venables and just his job status?
I think there is. I think there's a lot of confidence. Last year was really a determining year. I mean, you go 6-7 in Oklahoma, like that's big, but people kind of understood it. I mean, Lincoln Riley left. There was a lot of roster turnover. There wasn't a ton that he was dealing with. This year is big though. Obviously, it's the SEC, but he's got some things to clean up. You know, game management hasn't been great. Just last week, they're up 7-0 against Tulane. Kicker Tyler Keltner hits a 50-yard field goal and it was a delay of game, and then they have to punt the ball. Like you can't be making those mistakes in the SEC. You can't have these game management errors, be losing all these close games. You know, discipline has been an issue. They had a bunch of sideline penalties last year, like 6 or 7. Those are just the little things that you can't be doing in the SEC. I think the overwhelming majority of people of OU fans trust Brent Venables at this point, but he certainly has to prove it this year and next year. I wouldn't say, I mean, Billy Napier, you said it, his seat is burning hot right now. Brent Venables, I wouldn't say that at all. I would put the chances of him being fired within the next year very, very, very slim. Something would have to go drastically wrong for that to happen. But no, I mean, he's got to prove it this year. This is a huge year for Oklahoma in Oklahoma history, and it starts right here with the game against Tennessee.
All right, let's talk about that game against Tennessee one last time. Give us your what you think will happen on Saturday, score prediction, and maybe, for both sides, the biggest contributor, if anybody comes to mind.
Oh man, that's tough. I would say I'm not saying I could see Oklahoma winning just because they're so fired up, so passionate. It's such a huge game here. It's such a huge deal here. I could absolutely see them winning. Seth Latrell comes out with this whole new expansive playbook that leads them to victory. But I wouldn't bet on it. Absolutely not. I would say I'm going to go for score prediction. Tennessee 27, Oklahoma 13. I do think Tennessee is going to shut down Oklahoma on offense. I wouldn't be surprised though. Oklahoma, their first drive is normally pretty strong. They come out with some new stuff. They get rolling with that fast tempo offense. I wouldn't be surprised if they score early and then kind of settle it back, and then Tennessee gets a bunch of stops from there. Tennessee's offense versus OU's defense, that's going to be a great matchup. And I think around 24, 27 points is what they end up getting. Key contributors, I mean, Billy Bowman on defense, he led the league or led the country in interceptions last year. He got a pick last week. I think him coming up with turnovers, anybody on that defense who can come up with turnovers, that's going to be huge. And on offense, the entire offensive line, injuries are huge. They need to get guys back, guys healthy for this game. But the O line needs to step up, and that's what this game is really going to come down to. If they play like they've been playing the first 3 weeks, I really don't see this being too competitive of a game.
It sounds like Oklahoma is ready for the SEC, where every game is decided in the trenches. Louis, thank you again for joining us today. Go ahead and plug yourself, where we can find you, and thanks again for all the information.
Yeah, I would say X or Twitter is the main place to find me, Louis Raser. You can also find the OU Daily Sports on Twitter. We got Facebook, OU Daily, Threads, all that social media. And then absolutely check out our stuff on oudaily.com. Caleb, I really appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, for sure. For Louis, I'm Caleb Jower with the Daily Beacon Sports Podcast again, and we'll see you in Norman on Saturday.